Picture the Great Pyramid of Giza, 450 feet of absolute mathematical perfection sitting in the desert like the ultimate architectural flex. It's so flawless that modern people literally invent alien conspiracies just to explain it away. Because surely a bunch of guys in sandals couldn't just nail a geometric marvel on the first try. And they didn't. Before the Egyptians built the last surviving wonder of the world, they spent generations absolutely screwing up. The Great Pyramid wasn't a sudden stroke of mystical genius. It was the result of a brutal, centuries-long era of trial and error. An ancient engineering saga filled with cracked foundations, massive budget sinks, and epic, catastrophic collapses. To get to Giza, Egypt's engineers had to learn the hard way how not to build a skyscraper. To understand the pyramid, you have to start where they started, with the mastaba. Before the age of stone giants, if you were a pharaoh, you got buried under a massive, flat mud brick bench. It was functional, sure, but honestly, it was completely underwhelming. You're supposed to be a living god, the literal bridge between heaven and earth, and your eternal resting place looks like something your workers could build over a long weekend. But the aesthetics weren't even the biggest issue, it was the security. Mastabas had a massive, glaring vulnerability. They were incredibly easy to breach. Because they were built from mud and sand, any guy with a copper tool in a free afternoon could tunnel straight to the gold. Even worse, the local desert jackals would routinely burrow into these shallow graves and drag the royal VIPs out into the midday sun. It was an absolute mess. Your eternal, divine afterlife was basically guaranteed to be interrupted by a hungry wild dog or a guy with a copper shovel. The pharaohs needed an impenetrable fortress. They wanted something taller, so the peasants wouldn't forget who was in charge. They wanted something heavier, so the robbers couldn't tunnel through it. And most importantly, they needed to ditch the rotting mud brick for an upgraded material that screamed immortality: solid stone. But taking a labor force that had spent centuries playing with mud and suddenly demanding they build a towering, impenetrable fortress out of limestone, that is a massive logistical nightmare. It was going to require someone crazy enough to rethink the entire architecture of death. Enter Imhotep. Long before Hollywood turned him into a cursed CGI mummy, Imhotep was the real-world Leonardo da Vinci of ancient Egypt. He was the chief architect for Pharaoh Djoser, and he looked at the vulnerable mud brick mastabas and proposed a radical leap in engineering. His pitch was brilliantly simple. Instead of one flat mud bench, what if we use solid stone? And what if we take a mastaba, build a slightly smaller one on top of it, and just keep going? The result was the step pyramid of Saqqara. It looked like a massive, six-tiered wedding cake. It was the first monumental stone building in human history, and it was a massive success. The grave robbers couldn't tunnel through it. The jackals definitely couldn't climb it. But the step pyramid was just the monumental prototype. It was functional, but it wasn't sleek. Fast forward a few generations to Pharaoh Sneferu. Sneferu was a visionary with a dangerous obsession for perfection. He looks at the step pyramid and says, "Great proof of concept. Now, make the sides smooth." He doesn't want stairs to heaven. He wants a flawless, gleaming, geometric ramp. He wants a true pyramid. What follows is the most expensive, chaotic, trial and error phase in the history of architecture. Sneferu's engineers start their first mega project at a place called Meidum. Their strategy? Build a standard step pyramid, and then just fill in the steps with heavy packing stones to create a smooth outer shell. It was a catastrophic physics failure. Turns out, if you stack massive, heavy blocks on a steep, smooth incline without properly anchoring them to the core, gravity eventually wins. Sometime during or shortly after construction, the entire outer casing of the Meidum pyramid violently collapsed in a massive landslide of limestone. Today, if you go to Meidum, you don't see a pyramid. You see a bizarre, towering core surrounded by a massive hill of rubble. Does Sneferu give up? Absolutely not. He just opens up a second construction site at Dashur. This time, the engineers decide to build a smooth pyramid from the ground up. They are feeling confident, maybe a little too confident. They start building at a wildly ambitious, steep angle of 54 degrees. But they make a massive rookie mistake. They build the massive stone footprint on soft clay and sand. When the pyramid gets about halfway done, the sheer weight of the rock starts crushing the foundation. The ground shifts. Inside the burial chambers, massive cracks start appearing in the walls. You can almost hear the ancient site manager absolutely panicking. If they keep going, the whole thing is going to collapse on top of them, just like Meidum. To save the monument, the engineers pull an emergency mid-construction pivot. Right at the halfway mark, they drastically change the angle of the walls from a steep 54 degrees to a much safer, flatter 43 degrees. The result is the bent pyramid. It is historically fascinating, but aesthetically, it looks completely ridiculous. It's structurally sound, but it looks like the architect changed his mind halfway through and hoped nobody would notice. Everybody noticed. At this point, Sneferu is getting old. He has one collapsed tower and one squished pyramid. He just wants one good tomb. So, he funds a third attempt right down the road. This time, the engineers aren't taking any chances. No experimental angles, no soft ground. They start at that conservative, safe 43-degree angle from day one. It works. The red pyramid is born. It's a little squat, and it doesn't scrape the sky quite the way Sneferu originally dreamed, but its sides are perfectly smooth. No collapses, no cracks. The engineers finally figured out the math, the foundation, and the physics. Sneferu gets his immortality. But more importantly, he paid the brutal toll of innovation for the generation that followed. The fatal flaws were engineered out. The blueprint was finally stable. And that was perfect timing. Because Sneferu's son was a guy named Khufu. And Khufu was about to take his dad's perfectly safe, proven design and scale it up to absolute madness. Khufu didn't have to guess. He inherited something more valuable than any throne, a complete record of exactly how not to build a pyramid. No soft sand foundations, they leveled a solid bedrock plateau. No mid-project panic attacks over the slope. They locked in a mathematically flawless 51.5-degree angle, hitting the absolute sweet spot between maximum skyscraper height and structural integrity. For 2 decades, Khufu's team ran the most ruthless, precise logistics machine the ancient world had ever seen. They didn't just stack rocks, they perfectly aligned 2.3 million massive blocks to true north, with a margin of error so microscopic, it still makes modern contractors sweat. The Great Pyramid of Giza wasn't magic. It was simply the ultimate triumph of physics, a flawless monument built on the rubble of the prototypes that came before it. So the next time you hear someone on the internet claiming aliens must have built the pyramids, you can respectfully call their bluff. The Great Pyramid isn't a testament to extraterrestrial lasers or lost Atlantean magic. It is a monument to sheer human stubbornness. It's the story of ancient engineers staring at a collapsed mountain of rubble and deciding to just try again. The truth is always so much better than the conspiracy. Magic didn't build the ancient world. Trial, error, and a massive amount of sweat did.